I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about analysis and why, when you're answering analysis questions, you're not talking about what the writer is saying, but how they're saying it. Now, what I'm hoping you're thinking is, why would I want to do that? And I hope that this presentation will give you an answer to this. These two newspaper reports are about the same event. The Independent. Nearby, old women pick their way through the debris, trying to salvage the pitiful, battered remains of their lives. The Telegraph. All around Mr. Fayad, climbing like ants over the debris, were veiled women, grim-faced men and silent children. Most were trying to salvage meagre possessions from the wreckage of their homes. Some of the words they use are the same. They both use women, debris and salvage. But they describe the women differently. For the Independent, they're old women. Now that makes you think perhaps of your granny, or women who are finding it difficult to move, who perhaps are quite stiff, who are not very strong anymore. So it helps to give us a bit of sympathy for them. But in the Telegraph, they're veiled women. Because they're Muslim and they're wearing veils, and that's something that is quite difficult to imagine. We now start to imagine people who don't perhaps have faces and who have customs that we find quite difficult to deal with sometimes, the idea that women should be veiled. So reading that extract, we're maybe feeling a bit less sorry for them. Now, if you look at the picture, you can see that women can be both veiled and old, but which do you choose to focus on and why? And what is it that they're salvaging? In The Independent, it's described as the pitiful, battered remains of their lives. In the Telegraph, it's meagre possessions. Now, possessions we think of as stuff, things that we shouldn't perhaps be too attached to. They're just possessions. They're not really important. It's not like your family. But in The Independent, they're not disagreeing with the fact that it's things rather than people they're finding. They're not actually looking for bodies here. You use the word salvage to talk about rescuing ships or goods. It's not ever used about people or people's bodies. But there's a recognition that actually these things represent people's lives. You're thinking now, pitiful, battered remains of their lives, of perhaps photos or plates or cups or things they might have been given by people who were important to them. Let's look at the simile. The Independent doesn't use a simile, but the Telegraph does. All around Mr. Fayad, climbing like ants over the debris, were veiled women, grim-faced men and silent children. These people are being compared to ants. Now, what do we know about ants? They're very small, they're black, there are a lot of them, nobody's that interested in them. So we're getting a picture of people that we don't have to worry about too much. So empathy or detachment. The Independent uses words like old with connotations of being perhaps weak or vulnerable. Pitiful, battered remains of their lives helps us to feel sorry for them. With the Telegraph, ants are insects that most people don't particularly like. They're small, they're insignificant, we don't need to worry about them. Veiled suggests people whose customs we don't understand and we don't always agree with. Possessions has connotations of something that you shouldn't care that much about. They're only things that you own, not necessarily things that are important. So, through the use of the words, the writer of The Independent has made it clear we should feel sorry for these people. The writer of The Telegraph has made it clear that we shouldn't. And that's why word choice is important.